Welcome to the Fashionable State of Affairs by Vogue Poland. My name is Zuzanna and I won't bother with my impossible Polish last name. And I will be your guide through the thick and mud of the fashion industry. And let's be honest, it does need to clean up its acts. I really couldn't imagine a more powerful voice to launch this podcast series, a revolutionary in every sense. Not just disrupting the system, but rebuilding it with care, community, and radical creativity. Orsolą de Castro. She is the voice...
Zuzanna,
Yes?
Zuzanna, sorry, it's Orsolą.
Orsolą, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
basically, I'm really sorry. I didn't correct anybody at the very start of my career, and now I'm catching up.
No.
It's like Ursula, but with O, so the accent is on the first O. Apologies.
You know what? I'm going to keep it in because it's so important for people to know. You know, I've always been butchering my first name and my last name just to accommodate all the English speakers. So let me just give you the justice that you deserve. So let's just give it a try again. Orsolą. No. Orsolą. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll get it right by the time we see each other in person in October. So Orsolą de Castro is the voice of ethical fashion. She's the author of Loft Clothes Last, a manifesto for mending, rewearing, and refusing to look away. She pioneered upcycling with her brand From Somewhere in the late 90s, founded Estetica, combining aesthetics and ethics at London Fashion Week to spotlight sustainable design. And in 2013, together with Carrie Sommers, she co-founded Fashion Revolution, the world's largest fashion activism movement. Currently active in over 80 countries, including Poland. And here, a shout out to my dear friend Ewelina Antonowicz, who leads the Polish chapter. Yes, to all those incredible leaders all over the world. Orsolą, we'll get it right. Orsolą, welcome. What an honor to have you.
What a delight to be here.
Well, let's get straight into it. So we are bringing the political back into fashion today. And this year, 2025, came in like a storm. Feels like everything is on fire, and it literally was in early January. And I know many of us, especially in the activism and sustainability space, are really teetering on the edge of burnout. And this really should be a question for the end, but I thought that we should start with me asking you, how do you stay hopeful, with hope really feeling like a scarce resource these days?
So it's a really interesting question. I'm actually glad we start with this. I actually put a post at the beginning of the year saying, I renounce hope.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I renounce hope is because actually right now I don't need it. I don't have it and I don't need it. Without hope doesn't mean that my behavior changes. I'm still rigorous. I am still creative. I am still imaginative, and I'm still actioning on my principles, potentially actually even more. But I don't need a sensation of a happily ever after in order to be hit by the fact that it might not happen. That's going to be worse and more detrimental to me than actually carrying on doing what I've always done, encountering more and more people along the way without looking at hope, just looking at rigor, just looking at what I feel that I have to do and I have to give. So I saw hope as an obstacle, and I felt very relieved in letting go of it. I do see it. I have a flicker of it. And when I do have that flicker, bless it, it's gorgeous. It's like bumping into a beautiful rose that has just opened for you. But roses only come out in May. And the rest of the year, we know how to imagine them. So I'm imagining hope. But I am remaining active and powerful without it.
Absolutely well said. I also think that this is often an issue that many in the NGOs sector, run into, that you cannot sustain a movement if it's only based on an emotion, whether that's rage, whether that's hope, in order to keep on going, you need to have that sense of rigor. And I'm so glad that you used that word. It really is about the discipline. Mm-hmm.
Discipline, yeah. And I mean, disciplined in an undisciplined person, which is me. I mean, I'm the messiest person in the world. I'm confused.
Colorful.
All of that, exactly. But the reality is that rigor doesn't take anything away from that. And discipline is something that you can build as a habit into whatever it is that you do. I have to say, and I don't want to use any militaristic term in here. So I would probably last year have said I have a weapon, but I don't want to use battle, weapon, army, because that is a world I really do renounce. So I have a trick when it comes to dealing with the rest of the world, and it's mending.
Oh, and that brings me actually perfectly into, because you've already mentioned the post on hope that you that actually went viral on social media, and I've seen it spill into my non-fashion social media sphere, which made me really happy, because sometimes I think that we only talk to each other in this sustainability bubble. But and however strange it might sound, I really do love your social media persona. There's just this authenticity, joy.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying I love your social media persona.
Because it is a persona.
It's extremely close to the real me. Of course, it's extremely close to the real me, but there is also another person behind closed door, and it is important to make that distinction, especially for my family, my children, and my close friends. But because it takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there. And it takes a lot of courage to actually spill your guts out. And I have to do it within the confines of what that persona is. I can't do it about my, my family, my marriage and everything. It's confined to my political view and what I believe. And I have all the strength in the world to put myself out under those premises, and obviously I speak about fashion. I speak about women a lot. I'm very, very, very enamored with our history and how to put it right again.
Injustice that goes, that isn't just confined to our industry. Absolutely. You really make these connections, and you really make yourself also vulnerable on social media. But I also think that with that kind of following that you have amassed, it also carries a responsibility.
It does.
You're not just releasing any content.
No, I don't want to release any content. I mean, to be honest with you, I am a political animal, and I have always been since birth. I remember justice was a burning issue when I was, 3 or 4 years old. In the playground, I already had, my empathy in place and my understanding of people and the way that I wanted to be as a person, how I am perceived by others, and what carries me forward is a set of principles and values that have remained with me and aged with me and defined with me. And, it really is part of who I am. But the responsibility of putting yourself out there is, sometimes it's, to be honest with you, actually really embarrassing. When I consider myself as the old granny that I am, and I'm like, granny goes viral, it's like, oh God. But that's the beauty of it, It's like I am aware of the fact that I do a lot of irritating things on social media, and a lot of people will find me. Wait, as you like it, somebody else won't. But that's important too, because it means that I have found a way to put myself out there, honest and true, because I do suffer from honestitis. So I do say what I mean, and I don't have the fear of, losing followers or losing friends. That doesn't necessarily, because as you say, I am conscious of what I'm putting out there. I'm conscious of the fact that it needs to be honest, and it can only be authentic for me. I mean, I couldn't lie or I couldn't perform. I'm not capable of doing that. But to maintain an integrity, you need to have a very, very strong wind in your sail. And that is my wind in my sail. And it is about the things that I practice and I talk about. So, yeah.
And speaking of mending, so there was this one post that's really, I mean, it just touched me. I mean, you do use a lot of poetry and there's this one that is so simple and yet so powerful. And if you don't mind, I'm going to quote you. It's where you're musing on crochet and life. And you say, "When I feel like things are slipping, it helps me to tie knots. We are seeing so many of value slipping away, like sustainability, like care for our planet. The knot is resistance, one knot at a time."
Yeah.
This idea of mending, you know, I mean, actually knitting is not necessarily mending, but you could be, you know, fixing, and but it's this, but it's also putting your hands and energy to some good use, you know, rather than, you know, creating, rather than wasting ourselves away on endless doom scroll. I also just think that it's so important for us to show other ways to engage with the world.
Yes. So the mending thing is, for me, is cathartic, metaphoric, and actually the crochet is very much linked to the mending, because so my entire career started at a time of crisis, at a time of deep personal crisis, with a completely broken crocheted jumper, knitwear jumper, and I started crocheting around all of the holes, the stains, and the defects. So even though I practiced crochet since I was 6 and making hats and making, you know, granny squares, whatever, the principal element of crochet for me is one of either mending or continuing. I would lengthen the sleeves of a jumper or so, and transformation. So it is linked to that whole world. And it's been my saving grace. It's been my comfort, but it's been more than that. So we tend to think of domestic arts as frivolous, limited, confined. We are talking the first technology of humankind. I mean, I really believe the needle came before the wheel, and the first wheel was for spinning. So we are talking evolution and survival when we look at those crafts. We are talking looking at the beginning of trade. That's what we traded. Textiles. Textiles and crafts are the soil of the land from where they originate. So any crossover that we see is this geographical minestrone of humanity. So when I mend, when I crochet, yeah, sure, it's my thing. I'm up on the 4th floor, you know, in my little bubble. But it's way fucking deeper than that. You know, it is history, it's philosophy, it's evolution, it's biology, it's chemistry. You know, on that thread, whether I'm crocheting something or mending a pair of trousers, it's irrelevant. It's that thread. That thread connects me with hundreds of thousands of years of evolution driven by the female body, driven by female ingenuity, driven by our capacity to make life and to preserve life. That's why I always say recently, maintaining is campaigning. The more you keep, the more you do. It's a passive act, that of keeping. And yet, it is 100% the most practical way of actually stopping overproduction. It is elementarily simple, incredibly joyful, super functional, and
creative and fun. And it can also bring people together.
I know. And this is, you know, so this basically, I consider myself the holder of the best secret on the planet. Of course, there's a huge community of people that hold the same secret. But, we don't need therapy. There we are with our threads and we group instinctively between us. There's an innate understanding that when you are making something, you might have to unravel it because you might be making a mistake. Mm-hmm. So from a really simple gesture comes so many life lessons, so many metaphors with the way that we live. And I hold, that's my Bible.
And also so many possibilities. I mean, the thing about mistakes, it's all these imperfections that make something fascinating. I'm actually wearing a dress because
it's a beautiful.
Thank you. Well, I don't know if you can see it well, and probably listeners cannot see it, but I did take a picture. So it is a dress that my mom knitted in the 70s. At the time of absolute scarcity in Poland, of deep communism. And, this dress is, probably 50 years old, and it used to have sleeves, but she had turned the sleeves into scarf or something. It's just this idea of it's this alive garment, it's a garment that you love. It's a garment that you cherish. It's the garment that you keep.
Yeah, but there is also something more, it's so right now, this minute, I am 100% connected with your mother. Now, what have I got to do with your mother? Different areas, we're probably similar ages in some ways, but it's but this capacity of needle handling, crocheting, mending, whichever one it is, has brought me closer to women from when I was 6 years old, women that I would never have met and I would never have had something in common with otherwise. I mean, I can sit down on outside in Spain, in some remote village in Spain, dig out or south of Italy, wherever they're still crocheting on their doorsteps, sit down and crochet with them. And that is, I don't need to say a word. I don't need to speak about my political inclinations. I don't need to talk about my job in fashion. I can sit there and crochet, and we are on a level there,
Instantly connected.
And we are thinking the same things, because at the end of the day, when you are touching fiber, when you're growing fiber from your hands, yes, of course you have snippets of thoughts that are yours. But at the end of the day, we're all connected to that thread, to that needle, to that motion. That motion, that the slurp when the needle pulls from the yarn, your tension. And then it's like a signature. Each, sewing is a human signature. So it's deep, it's radical. Radical as in from the roots. The etymology of the word radical doesn't just mean, left-wing or extraordinary. It actually means from the roots. Radici, guys. Radici. That's what mending and crochet is. It's our roots, not metaphorically, for real. I mean, the nanosecond we learned how to make something, we learned how to mend it. And the invention of the needle and weaving fibers is potentially what kept us alive during one of the many glaciations or extremely cold periods that humanity has encountered.
And look at crises as well, absolutely. And I mean, mending the world. This is a big job for us to have. But I also wanted to speak of that community, that that global connection, and something that you have, something that you have given life to, which is Fashion Revolution, the global movement that was co-founded in the wake of the Rana Plaza factory collapse, where over 1,100 garment workers, mostly women, lost their lives. And it remains the worst and the deadliest industrial disasters in history. And it was a turning point that sparked a worldwide demand for accountable and transparent industry. And that's thanks to your action. And we were just celebrating the Fashion Revolution Week a couple of weeks ago, end of April. And I don't know if you've made that connection, if you're following it so closely, but 12 years later, on the very anniversary of this tragedy on April 24th, the brand whose garments were being produced in that factory launched a special collaboration with Polish designer Magda Butrym. I don't know if you've seen the craze.
No, I haven't seen it, no.
Well, I'm speaking of H&M, and they literally had a big launch on April 24th. And I'm just wondering,
What?
isn't it a little tone deaf? And it was just sold out in a matter of seconds. And it just, to be fair, H&M was the first and the largest brand that signed onto the 2013 Accord on Fire and Building Safety in Bangladesh. But still, I just think like we as customers, consumers, citizens, we don't necessarily need to remember the dates, but for them, should it not be,
I have a theory around this, to be honest with you, and I think that this is obviously extremely deliberate and obviously a way of attracting attention in the wrong way.
Yes.
I mean, this is symptomatic, though, of the society that we have seen develop over the past few years in particular, where impunity breeds impunity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to be honest with you, H&M tried it before. So when I think it was the third or the second year of Fashion Revolution, and they started their campaign on recycling. And they wanted to do a big recycled week, and they chose the week of Fashion Revolution. Obviously, they had a shitload of money. They were working with a pop star, and basically what they were doing was that they were coming up with a pack of lies. There was nothing in that campaign that was actually accurate, that if you scrutinized it and said, okay, show me the real in this, real could not be found. So I remember, I remember those days extremely well. I took them on by myself. Nobody in my team had, basically my team said, you go, you go, girl, you speak. And I literally had to face the press by myself and announced H&M on this absolute waste washing that they were doing. And at the end, it worked out that the CEO basically had to apologize and say, yes, the figure that we used were not accurate. But the whole point was that they did it deliberately in order to take attention away from us.
But I'm just thinking sometimes, don't you think that the revolution has been co-opted? Of
course it's been co-opted. That's why I left. I mean, I believe that the fashion revolution was and is still an incredibly important movement. Mm-hmm. But it is not an important movement in a way as a whole. I really believe in the power and in the influence of the individual teams, and which is really the opposite to when we started. When we started, we kind of needed to put everyone together. Mm-hmm. And now I almost feel like it needs to scatter. Mm-hmm. That's also one of the reasons why I left, because I am unfortunately one of these people that takes a lot of attention. I'm noisy, I scream louder than most, and people tend to be attracted when I have something to say. I'm not saying it with false modesty. I noticed it during Fashion Revolution in particular. And I didn't want it to be about me. I remember when Rana Plaza, during COVID and the problems that we were having in terms of supply chain all over the world, and in particularly in India and Bangladesh. And the press was still coming to myself or Kari, and I was saying, look, we have wonderful coordinators in India and Bangladesh, and this is a local problem as well as a global problem. So for me, the importance of Fashion Revolution is that of really having strong local individual teams that behave and act in the way that is functional and benefits that local community. But back to H&M, I mean, this is Trumpian behavior. This is like, let me shock you because I can. And that is what I find deplorable. I had no idea. Had I known, I'd have gone onto my own social media like a ton of bricks.
But sometimes it's giving them, again, more attention. It was brought up by Polish, Polish activists, because it was the Polish designer, the Polish brand that did this collaboration. So many people were, so many people attended the event. So many people,
and well done on the Polish brand. And these, these are the things. It pisses me off that it is H&M, but nevertheless, of course, I'm delighted that Polish brands are taking
global stage. But in this way, is this what you want to be associated with? And again, I'm just thinking of something that literally came out a few hours ago, so probably you've not seen it, but another major fast fashion player, Zara, just made headlines.
Yes, no.
Have you seen, with its 50th anniversary campaign?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a full-blown fashion spectacle. You would think this is like a 100th year anniversary of American Vogue, and yet it is Zara. And you have Steven Meisel behind the lens, styled by Carl Templer. But, think of the cast. I mean, they have...
I thought exactly the same thing. And I thought, okay, if none of them are going to be waking up and getting out of bed for less than $10,000 20 years ago, how much did Zara pay
them
for all of them? And where else could that money have gone right now, at this point in time, in this world, under this sky?
I mean, we're talking 50 models, just for our listeners to understand. 50 models shot on the same day in one studio. And we have Naomi and Linda, who need no last name, but we also have Amber Valletta and Karen Elson, who have been very outspoken for ethical industry. I mean, why are the most respected creatives still lending their names and faces, in case of models, to legitimize fast fashion?
So that is a question I really very definitely cannot answer. But what I can tell you is that my entire career has been defined by not working with celebrities.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, to be honest with you, there was only one early on celebrity shoot for Fashion Revolution. And to be honest, every single person that took part was not really the kind of celebrity they really believed in what they were doing. But I steadfastly refused to work with celebrity for that reason. And at the end of the day, it's not because I don't necessarily trust them, it's because I don't want them. I don't really need, I really hate anything pyramidical. But what is happening right now, which is clear and everyone knows, I mean, us in the fashion industry, is that basically fast fashion has spurned such an ugly baby, also known as ultra fast fashion, that it has no other way out of this than plastic surgery all over itself in order to reposition itself as premium.
That's true.
But let's go back to the very, very, very beginning. Look at luxury fashion, upping its price beyond imaginable. I mean, unavailability except for, the 0.01%. But hello, remember when luxury fashion started talking about diffusion lines? If those diffusion lines had really been available, affordable, would we have bought cheap copies from the fast fashion brands? Would fast fashion be born? Would it have been born? So my point is that each excess generates further excess. And each exaggeration generates further exaggerations. And at the end of the day, an exaggeration and an excess can only inhabit one end of the scale or the opposite end of that scale. And both ends of that scale are dangerous. I mean, dangerous because of people, dangerous because of planet. And everything in the middle for some reason, is rendered invisible or fake. So this is what we have right now. We have a desperate search for the Zaras and the H&Ms to reinvent themselves as something else, because obviously someone took their place. The Shein and the,
Temu's, yes.
Temu, whatever it's
yes.
called.
And actually...
And so there you go. But the reality is that, when you look at this industry in its entirety, it is an industry that the whole industry has been co-opted from a craft to a business. I can't think of a worse industry to make that transition from a craft to a business, because it's really, it has turned something quite wonderful and extremely ancient into a commodity. I wouldn't say the same of the car industry, for instance. I think that was somehow, by design, created to be what it is, but not textile and fashion. No. This industry contains way more than just the profits and the exploitation that we see now. And that is where I turn into the raging feminist that I am, because fashion is primarily a female-made and a female-serving industry. Always was. And it actually showed creativity, technique. I mean, we were the first mathematicians. Still, in the south of Italy, there is a type of embroidery which the actual pattern is so complicated that it can only be remembered with nursery rhymes and songs. And women, because they were illiterate, as they weave, they sing these songs to remind themselves of the stitches and the weaves and the change. But whoever wove was the first mathematician. So
beautiful. I didn't know that. I love the stories woven in all the clothing, just
whenever you look at a piece of clothing, that oddio, I don't know how to say it in English, la trama e l'ordito. But every thread.
Every thread, yes. Wątek I osnowa in Polish.
Wątek I osnowa?
Yes, well, you speak such perfect Polish. Yeah, I think it's wątek I osnowa. I also do not know how to say it in English, and I am learning Italian, but I'm not there yet.
I find it extremely confusing. There's some technical terms I only know in English, and others I only know in Italian. It depends on what stage in my life I was when I learned them. But this is what we've lost. We now have an industry that completely disregards the geniality of its conception. And I think it also obviously disregards the well-being, clearly we know, of nature and certainly of the supply chain workers that, make our products, but also us, the wearers. And again, this is another massive, massive issue that I have with the luxury sector, because I've never said it's fast fashion. I always say it is the entirety of the fashion industry.
Yeah, like you coined the term fast luxury.
I coined in my book, the term fast luxury. There's no difference to me between, the majority of the products that we see now stamped with luxury and, in fact, if anything, sometimes I find, certain fast fashion brands better made than a lot of the luxury that I see. I mean, to be honest.
But even just, recently, just speaking of something that's been on everyone's mind and headlines, tariffs. And I know that you've talked about it as well, because we've seen Chinese producers taking to TikTok in these viral videos, exposing that flawed logic that expensive means ethical, just showing that these items are made in the very same factories and
by the very same people.
By the very same people, and actually, some have framed America's escalating war trades as a possibility, to curb overconsumption of cheap throwaway fashion. And we've seen that Shein and Temu have taken a hit, that consumers have reacted to rising prices. And I think that they're, it dropped by about 20%, their sales. So strangely, could Trump had in some way, I don't know, contribute to the end of fast fashion, ultra fast fashion?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's the rest of the world that's still going to buy it. I mean, apart from the fact that the tariffs also have a limit, it's products under a certain so they just need to make smaller or bigger. I can't remember the orders, but there are ways around them. Unfortunately, there's loopholes. To be honest with you, I only think the only thing that's going to stop this proliferation of shit product, be it, as I said before, fast fashion or fast luxury, is us not buying it anymore. And the truth is that, even this made in China, made in India, made in the worst made in is often at our doorstep. And this was proved when, Vogue was discovered, paying their garment workers in Leicester £3.60 per hour. The luxury sector has just been found out producing in Chinese-run sweatshops in the north of Italy. So impunity, guys. This is impunity. This is brands taking the piss out of us. But back to what I was saying before, it's not just their supply chain that is left wanting. It's us who buy clothes. Show me a luxury brand that does sizes over a 44. So, I mean, this is a massive issue for me. So this is something that boils me. I have 4 children, 3 daughters, all adults. My youngest is 21. None of my children, I'm quite thin because I have Graves' disease, which basically I've had it all my life. It keeps me thin, all sorts of other symptoms. But my daughters aren't necessarily like me. Going shopping with my youngest daughter can be the most painful experience that we go through, something that should be joyous. Mother and daughter going shopping for a birthday present. Me trying to take her places where she can find something that she will like and cherish and keep. And nobody doing her size. Nobody. I repeat that. Nobody. None of the ones, especially, a few years ago when she was younger and she wanted to dress, nobody doing. And she's not obese. She's just large. So the brands that demand an enormous amount of money and an enormous amount of attention, and that they don't have us all covered. That for me is exemplary of the way that they see not just their makers, but their customers. So the only reason why there aren't bigger sizes is because it's so much more expensive.
No, but also if you think of that whole amount of overproduction of so much clothing being produced, and yet there is niche, there's niche for people with bigger sizes, or there's niche for people with like disabilities who cannot find clothing that that they want to wear, that is trending, or, I don't like the term trending, but, something that isn't just functional, but is also aesthetically fun and pleasing.
Absolutely. I hadn't even thought about the correlation with waste. Yeah. This is going to tickle my brain for a while, because if with all of that excess, they could absolutely afford to employ the pattern makers and use the extra fabric needed in order to make larger sizes. And don't even get me started on disabled, although I am beginning to see some extraordinarily talented disabled wear designers, adaptive wear designers, but coming into the equation. But I feel that we have so when we started Fashion Revolution, we always used the word disrupt. We will be disrupting this industry. And I actually don't believe this is possible. I don't believe that this industry has any intention of, allowing itself to be disrupted. In a way, this Zara thing with all of the...
We are seeing the disruption. It's just we're not the disruptors. Trump is the disruptor.
We're not the disruptor, but the disruption. Yeah. So going back to as I said, I don't trust Trump.
No, of course.
The reason why he's imposed in tariffs is because he's thinking about how he can create the same thing himself and benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a little bit like that Churchill, whoever speech, when they said, we will be unconquered. And I'm thinking, gosh, from the biggest conqueror of all to actually cherish your being unconquered. It's awful. But same with Trump. I believe if he could build, Trump fashion in the US now, he would. Except you can't. You see, you can't reshore a skill that you've taken somewhere else. You can reshore clothes making.
Mm-hmm.
They'll never reshore fabric making. That would take them 20 years to rebuild that textile making intelligence into the US. That's just not going to be possible.
Mm-hmm.
That's why all of the fabrics, they will still have to come from Italy. But it's just, it's this lost the balance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There is a line of yours that I really love. You often say it isn't enough to look for quality in the products you buy, but in the quality of life of the people who make them. And really, Fashion Revolution's most powerful, famous slogan was, "Who made your clothes?"
Yeah.
This still remains unanswered. But who is holding the power in fashion today? Like, how do we begin to shift that power towards makers, empowering local communities, people who have been kept invisible? Do you see, has any positive change has happened in those past 13 years?
Okay, so basically, just as we cannot disrupt this industry, it means that the only thing that we can do is to construct the alternative.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really one of the reasons why eventually I left Fashion Revolution, as well as feeling that it needed to be more decentralized and that the teams are the ones that really should carry the organization. The other reason being that after years of berating, I felt, this is never going to work. Antagonizing is never going to work with this mentality, with these people, with these men in power. So the only thing that we can do is build an alternative that will be relevant by virtue of being better.
Mm.
And it is the love of my life, what I do with younger, emerging, older, but designers that want to work in a way that is kind to people and kind to nature and customers and so on and so forth. So this is what I believe that we can do. And, fashion teaches us that what is trendy one day is not trendy the next day. So in fact, I would love to take the skinny jeans and the flared jean analogy in here. And, we all know that it's skinny and then flared and skinny and then flared. So fashion is cyclical and it reproposes itself all the time. So it's got micro trends and it's got macro trends. This one's about to die.
Mm-hmm.
This quantity and lack of quality, both in the products and in the lives of the makers, has bubbled up to the surface. And it's time for a fashionable change. It's time to go from skinny to flare. And I do believe that what we have witnessed recently, this shift when it comes to Gen Z from fast fashion to secondhand. I mean, at the minute, it looks like it's very much swapping one addiction for another. They're still buying quantity.
Yes, huge amounts, and they're still discarding it. I mean, they are discarding in a sense that they're reselling it on the same platforms.
They're reselling it. You see, this is the most
circularity. Yeah,
this is the most spectacular own goal of this whole industry, going cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. What's happened is that it has obliterated any care for any clothing that we may have. And therefore, my kids, for instance, who, raised by me, so they might have a slightly different outlook, but they buy and sell, buy and sell, buy and sell, buy and sell.
In and out.
There's nothing I can say against it. It's like, well, I wouldn't interfere in their choices anyway. But it has taught me that it's not done for sustainability. It's done because of the lack of care. Now, my 21-year-olds come to me the other day saying, okay, I'm done with this. Now I'm done. Now I want to now I want to start to build a wardrobe that's going to last me for the rest of my life. Fine, we're working on that. It's great. But the important thing here is another. And that is, so when I wrote my book, I was writing my book in 2019 and it was published in 2021. But there's a whole chapter devoted to the secondhand market and how I very much believed was going to be the next big thing. And at the time, even at the time of publishing, even my publisher said, are you sure about that?
Oh, it's
and
massive.
Of course, now it's absolutely huge. So, listen to me. Actually, secondhand is always precursor of one thing. And, because we bought secondhand in the 80s, we loved it. We bought vintage. We used to scour, vintage market. We used to buy things, steal things, you name it. We possessed it. And I can tell you that the precursor of mending and repairing and transforming is buying secondhand, because buying secondhand demands a mental flexibility. It demands that you think, at the very least, of a restyle. How am I going to take this from somebody else's body and actually make it the right thing for my own skin? And then you think, oh, a little chop. And then you think, just a little pin here. And because mending, altering, and all of these techniques are much more widely available, and because this generation doesn't understand quality if it hit them on the face like a wet fish, because they've had so many years of just fast fashion, they're going to be perfectly happy to start, altering and changing their clothes. When I was growing up, altering a dress was like, God, it had a French seam and it was satin and it was like, your hands you were terrified.
Shake. Yes.
Botch it up.
Am I going to destroy it? But you're right.
Am I going to destroy it? Exactly. But if you've got a boohoo skirt, my cat can pick up that hemline or alter it. And that is going to be, but that's a wonderful thing. Clothes are so simply made that it's incredibly simple to transform them, incredibly
undo
simple
them,
to repair them,
yes,
and incredibly simple to maintain them. So, and this is what secondhand will be teaching the next generation. So I don't know what's after Z.
Alpha, I think it's Alpha. They're now on the rise. Yes,
we should giving all of baby Alphas being born as a birthday present a set of knitting needles.
A knitting kit.
Because at the end of the day, that's what they'll use.
I have to say, this is one of the most hopeful take on the excess of fast fashion and just unconstrained creativity of mending and altering clothing. I didn't see that coming. I actually really, really love it.
It's also not just the creativity. I was talking to somebody around, is this giving creativity to everyone? And it kind of is and isn't. Because it also is, weirdly enough, it's also mixed in with that rigor, because if you're taking something to be mended or altered or transformed by somebody that does it better than you, that's a really wonderful exchange. That is a really money-worthy exchange, because either you're like me, in which case you're hyper creative, you know exactly what you've got done, but you still have the fear of ruining a French seam. So therefore you take it to somebody and you have the idea and they have the skills. But it can be the other way around, whereby you just have something and you want to keep it and it doesn't work, and you present it to somebody with those skills and that understanding, absorb their creativity, their sort of psychological analysis of what would look good on you. And that's an incredible exchange. So, and it's how clothing should be. Clothing is about exchanges. At the end of the day, and I don't want to be rhetorical. This is not about rhetoric. This is about a system that worked for millennia and millennia and millennia, and a smaller system that has been in place for a really tiny amount of time, 40, 50 years, which has not worked. By any means, it has not worked. So I'm not doing any rhetoric. I'm not saying it was better in my days. I'm saying, sorry, guys, we've just gone through some giant mistake and we actually need to go back to things that work and adapt them to what we've discovered while we were making this giant mistake. But it's clothing are about exchanging, passing them on, borrowing from your friends, you know.
Constant motion. Constant motion. Orsola, am I saying it correctly again?
Yeah.
Orsola. Okay, well, I will master it before we see each other in person. There's so many more topics I wanted to touch on, but like I said, I want to leave something for our big moment during Business Fashion Environment Summit in Warsaw on October 14th. Everyone will have a chance to meet you in person, to listen to you. We will be talking about, the past, the present, the future of fashion, and the stories that matter. It's been an absolute pleasure. You've restored some of that hope that I had lost, or showed me that I can carry on without necessarily having to hold on to it. And I just wanted to end this episode with your own words, a sort of call to action that has really inspired millions and will inspire millions to come, Alphas and Gen Zs and more generations. Be curious, find out, do something.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me today. Thank you for inviting me to Poland. I really look forward to meeting you in person and your dress.
Yes, and we will show you the best of times. I'm already thinking of so many potential, I don't want to call them collaborations, but just exchanges with so many great creatives we have here. And
Brilliant.
Yes, you will have a wonderful time.
I can't wait, Zuzanna. I can't wait. But anyway, thank you for today. And it is just such a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. To be continued. Thank you so much.
Definitely.
Bye.